being top of mind in a sea of lawyers is a powerful tool.
Helpful doesn't just mean providing legal services. It means providing information, providing connections, being somebody that somebody actually wants to talk to right on a daily basis.
When I have conversations with folks, I look at it from a very human perspective.
When we talk about LinkedIn, I do think there are a lot of lawyers out there who feel like it's a place where you've got to be very formal. But when you start being more casual and essentially becoming more of a human, that leads to all sorts of great business development things because people see you as a person and not as a blank corporate suit.
This is Leveraging Latitude, cultivating a full life in the law. Please join us on our journey as we discover how to leverage the hard work of becoming a lawyer to achieving success and leading a rich and fulfilling life in the law.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Leveraging Latitude. Today is a really fun episode because we're going to be talking about starting and scaling a law firm, but we also have a guest co-host. As you all know, Tim Haley and Candice Reed are typically one of the other co-hosts on the show, but today we've got a new guest co-host, my colleague and Latitude partner, Kyle Robish. Kyle joined Latitude a little while back, and he's the partner in charge of our Tampa operations. Kyle, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself before we get into today's conversation?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, and here being both Latitude and on the podcast. Kyle Robish, I'll partner at Latitude Tampa Bay. Before that, I was a partner at Bradley Arrett Bolt Cummings here in Tampa, an associate at Venable up in DC for 4 years, and I started my career as a federal law clerk. And now I get to work with legal departments and law firms across Tampa, across Florida, across the country, to plug in really awesome contract and flexible attorneys into their legal departments and law firms. And it's been a heck of a ride over the past year.
It's amazing. And what's really exciting is that the three of us, and we haven't introduced our guest yet, the three of us here all met and got to know each other, I think, through LinkedIn. And so I'm going to just jump right ahead. Our guest today is Matthew Margolis. It's Matt's Law. You all may recognize him from social media. Matt's done it all, really. He's been a law firm attorney. He's gone in-house. He's worked in legal tech. And now he's running his own firm. And so I've gotten to know Matt over the years, as I know Kyle has as well. So Matt, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Thanks, man. It's great to be on this. Yeah, I'm Matt. I run a firm in South Florida called Margolis PLLC. My law partner is my wife, Karina. She's a fantastic attorney as well. I'm excited to be on the pod. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk through building a law firm and also just like joking around with you guys. This is always a fun time for me.
Yeah, no, I think it's so much fun. It's so cool to blend your friends and work. And it's I'm excited to also talk about all things small firms, business development, running a practice. But I love the story of how you, Matt, worked with Kyle in the past before Kyle joined Latitude. And I don't know if Kyle or Matt, one of you want to share the story of how you all know each other.
Can I do it? This is fun.
I'm going to regret this. I know I'm going to regret letting you tell the story.
So I met Kyle through LinkedIn, and I was in-house at a private equity group down in Miami. And Kyle is just super nice guy, like providing like good content on the internet, kind of always explaining to me what his practice is, what his firm does. And his firm had a very well-known senior living practice. And that was a aspect of our portfolio that we were really going after and acquiring. And through one way or another, Kyle ended up our outside counsel, and his firm ended up our outside counsel. And which is super weird, by the way, just candidly, because like not in the sense of like he's a really great attorney, the firm was fantastic, awesome service, but it's weird because like we're friends. And I don't know about you guys, but like if you ever order around your friends, it's the weirdest thing on the planet, right? Like Kyle was the outside attorney, the private practice attorney. I was in-house, and then like maybe I don't know what, like 2-3 years later, it kind of flipped almost, where Kyle is internal at a company, and then I'm private practice, which is also equally weird. So, but yeah, that's how we work together.
I think that's such an interesting path to business development, how you get to know a client from the outside counsel's perspective. And so this ties into the first question I have for you, Matt. everyone who goes solo, they want to know, like, where am I going to find clients? It's just such an important part of the practice. So how have you been able to do that ever since you launched your practice?
Yeah, that's like the number one question I get. But biz dev is like the hardest part about going solo. You can always find someone to do the work. I know people will fight me on that, but actually finding the work is hard. So for me, I was fortunate enough to start in November during the holidays, which I'm being facetious. That was frightening. No one has budget. If you're an in-house attorney, you're laughing at me hearing that statement. No one has budget. Things were crazy. So what I ended up doing very quickly was finding local firms or firms that had practice areas that were complementary to mine and trying to uh, either have referral relationships or be of counsel to fill a gap. Right. And I go to there's a couple firms I ended up working with. There's one in particular, it's a franchise firm, Stellar, and they do a lot of great work. And they were like, hey, well, what about privacy? Do you do privacy? Yes. Employment? Yes. Corporate? Yes. So I got to fill a hole, not necessarily a real hole, but like I got to help them in certain aspects of their practice to allow them to expand their services. And I did that. And and there's a number of applicable bar rules to apply to it. So like, if you're listening to this, please consult your bar rules. But that was a way of gaining work quickly and get myself moving. Outside of that, there's these fractional services, like this is a good example, that provide work to attorneys. And that's another way of finding work. Now, outside of all those things, I am so chronically online. It is like frightening.
Chronically online.
But yeah, being online was very helpful, right? Marketing my services online, not necessarily advertisements, but just making myself known to the general public is very helpful, because being top of mind in a sea of lawyers is a powerful tool. So I ended up just being so known as a corporate attorney, as a weird law attorney, as someone who can just like, if I don't know how to do it, Matt will figure it out. And that definitely led to some great client development.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting because you went from in-house to tech, legal tech, to starting your practice. Kyle, I know you were at a firm before and you had a lot of successful business development approaches. I'm curious, what was your perspective similar to Matt's, like being online helped, or were there other ways that you drove business?
Yeah, mine was kind of a grab bag. I definitely got some purchase online. I mean, look, Matt and I met. He started the story at a convenient point, right? What he didn't tell you is I was one of the 3 people liking his original videos.
That's it.
Like in 2020, because I was, an associate toiling away, and I was like, this stuff's really funny. Nobody else thought it was funny back then.
It's a nice
I was
jab.
on the Matt train before.
It's a nice little jab you just threw there. I respect that. So we're friends. Just like,
yeah.
But so I mean, and that, so you can call that, it wasn't business development, it was getting a relationship with somebody who at that point we were both associates in theoretically competing law firms, right? But the life of the law is long and it has twists and turns. And so Matt became a client, and then now we flipped, right? My point being, so yeah, that you can trace that to being active online. I did a very similar thing out in the real world, if you will, right? In Tampa, in DC, and across the country, just showing up places, meeting people, trying to be helpful, trying to be top of mind. And then when there was an opportunity to help them, whether it was through Bradley, my firm, or me individually, helping them, right? And those things kind of all eventually pay dividends. But I think that's what it boils down to: being patient, planting seeds, and being helpful however you can. And helpful doesn't just mean providing legal services. It means providing information, providing connections, being somebody that somebody actually wants to talk to, right, on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things.
Yeah. Double click on the like being helpful. Like that happened recently where whenever I don't get like a deal or a matter, I make it clear too. I'm like, okay, I mean, that's fine. It's not a big deal. Like if you want me to be helpful anyways, like if you want to call me up and be a sounding board as it relates to certain aspects of whatever you're doing, I'm happy to. Not only do I like enjoy talking to people and enjoy talking about the law, like Kyle's point, like I know like being helpful, maybe one day you'll come back, maybe one day you'll tell someone, but that's definitely a very important tip, is try to make yourself as helpful as possible to folks.
And do you think, Matt, that it was easy for you to be helpful because you sat in the shoes of your potential clients, right? You were in-house. What were some of the lessons you learned from in-house that help you now as you generate new clients?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm still kind of in-house, right? Because of the fractional practice. I would say the lessons are, God, this is so cliche to say this out loud. It's it being human, right? Like, but I mean that in the context of a more professional setting, not being human as in like, just like, again, like in normal conversations. So what I mean by that is when I have conversations with folks, I look at it from a very human perspective and I talk to people in a very human perspective. So like when we have conversations, I want to make sure, because I hate also being in like a very awkward, rigid environment. And some people like to be very professional. It's just not my bag. But I'll be in a call with someone and it's just like I'm talking to a business person when I'm internal. It is a very friendly, like we've known each other for years. There's not really a true intro. And that's how I present legal advice. That's how I present my personal business advice. That's how they get these conversations going. That was one thing I learned being in-house that was like tremendously helpful. And it's helpful for business development because when I talk to prospective clients, they're like, oh, he's like, we're friends. We're already friends. I've known you for 15 minutes. We're already friends because it's how I talk to people. That's how I want these relationships to be. And like being very normal, personal, very relationship driven with my like revenue generating departments.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I apply that to everything now.
Yeah, I think being human is such a big part of it that, conceptually it's like, yeah, people say it, but what does it mean? And I think that social media really enables it. I mean, the story that, that you all shared, that Kyle, liking one of Matt's first videos, Matt putting up that post, like, when we talk about LinkedIn, I do think there are a lot of lawyers out there who feel like it's a place where you've got to be very formal. But when you start being more casual and, essentially becoming more of a human, that leads to all sorts of great business development things because people see you as a person and not as a blank corporate suit, right?
Kyle, that's how you were. When you talked to me when you were like outside counsel, you were like, it was the same perspective. You would talk to me and be like, look, I don't like this. Or, I mean, not just put words in your mouth, but you would speak very conversational to me. And I respected that and I appreciated that. Look, between us, I don't like this. I don't know if I would do this kind of thing. Or yeah, I like this. That's a good idea. I think it makes sense. Think about this. And you're right. Like you talk like that on social media and people, it resonates the same way, the same exact way.
I think it's the only, to Matt's point and Alex, your original point, I think it's the only way to be really effective on social media. Otherwise, you're just noise, right? There's lots of noise. People talking about their awards, people sharing their law firm or corporate, press releases, right? People just kind of talking in this sort of voice, right? When you actually add personality and an original thought, it cuts through that, right? And that's where you can actually get some purchase and start making real connections with people, right? But if you're just going to kind of be a bot and act like a bot, you're going to be seen as a bot. And so, and for me, I was an interesting place at Bradley, to Matt's point, because I was an associate and then a partner at an 150-year-old AmLaw 200 law firm headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama, right? Old school. I mean, and the firm is innovative. They do some really cool things, as Matt saw, right? But my point is, I walked a line of, being one of the early adopters on social media at the law firm, particularly at where I was in my career. And to the firm's credit, they encouraged it. They were fantastic about it. They never discouraged me, and they gave me, even platforms within the firm to sort of talk about the things I was doing. But the thing I always went back to is, don't just post your Super Lawyers Award. Post a meme. Yeah, you have to get the voice right? Or post a joke or engage on a personal level with something. Share. I love sharing about my family because that's really important to me. I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Do a lot of that, right? And those things resonate because guess who else has families? Everybody else, right? So that's how I think you make a real connection. But I had to do it in a way that sort of walked in two worlds. I was fortunate to have a place that let me do that. And certainly, of course, Latitude, same way. But I think I'm a living example of, if I can do that at the place I was coming from, I think anybody can do it.
If we can go back a second, because we didn't address this, you did a voice that was very similar to the parents from the Peanuts. And
yes, that's what it was. It was meant to be like the classroom, like.
That was really well done. I like that.
Well
I'm going to use.
It's a lot of practice at home.
Is
Yeah,
that, is that right?
before we started recording, Kyle was practicing.
He's
for all
like
the
looking in the mirror and
listeners
he's
out
like,
there,
wah, 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 wah. Like, I got it, nailed it. We got this. It was really good. I agree with that. I agree with everything you're saying. It really is, and it's in outside the realm. I always feel like we always talk about LinkedIn because it's a professional setting, but like in all platforms, right? Like it turns out like Instagram, I get more business actually from Instagram than LinkedIn now, and it's because I can do more of both, right? I can give
Mhm.
information, kind of like I feel like it's almost becoming a better platform than LinkedIn, and in the context of like showing both sides and kind of treading the line, like you're saying, Kyle. Like I can be personal, joke, show family, and then Stu do both. Um, I don't know if it's maybe because Instagram. I think with LinkedIn, I think there's probably this perception it's like more professional, and Instagram you maybe let your guard down a little bit more because it's a social media platform, especially for like millennials and a little bit older. Like
Mhm.
this is all I know.
I think Instagram is more personal, and so it's far more disarming. LinkedIn
Yeah,
works really well, but Instagram, there's another element to it that makes it more real, which I think what we were saying is that gets to the point. If you act human, it's more real. It can be effective, and I think the most important point that I want to hammer home for the listeners is that Matt's been very successful at generating lots of clients through these social channels, and I think that you're probably too modest to say that, Matt, but I think it's important to highlight. It's not just us talking about it in theory. It's produced actual results, and that leads me to kind of a question about your practice nowadays, which is most people are worried about getting clients. You've been able to get a healthy, steady flow of lots of demand, um, but how do you scale that? Do you just work more hours? Do you like how did you think through that part of your process once you started getting tons of work through the door?
this is like the hardest question for any, and not even just like law firms, for you guys too, like for any business owner or management level position. Like how do we scale? It's hard, dude, guys. It's like really hard, and like everyone listening, it's really hard, and I'm still learning. So like one day I'll listen back on this and be like, idiot, you didn't know what you're talking about. Which is always my favorite thing to listen to podcasts and say that. But um I'm trying to figure it out. So what I do, I think, and I'll say this to anyone listening, like temporary, fractional plug to Latitude, talent is helpful, is very helpful because twofold. If you're bringing in a lot of business, especially in the practice that I'm in, which is much more of a generalist practice, I'm not going to be able to do everything in the sense of like, yes, I know it, but like at any given point, I may need some assistance. Like, hey, you handle that employment agreement. I'm going to go handle this commercial contract, things of that nature. It's really great for like the overflow related work. Um, Even getting specialists, right? If I need a specialist on an ongoing basis, like I know I always will have tax help, right? I'm always going to need tax assistance. Um, Utilizing service like that gives me those resources um, in a ongoing basis that is not only just is affordable for the practice, but is reliable and is consistent. So I'll say that for scaling, especially, and by the way, I see this with companies too. Like you have this like contingent workforce, like temporary workforce. Most companies have departments or mechanisms for it. I think a lot of law firms, the ones that utilize it really well, you'll never know because it's like a secret sauce. The ones that don't utilize it, like may look down upon it and until they realize like how much of a game changer it is. But yeah, so like that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of scaling is processes, which
Hmm.
we're working on ourselves, right? You can always improve on that. So having the right operations in place, having a mechanism for as small as like how does the engagement letter go out and what happens next, to long term, who is finding and responding to RFPs issued by large companies. So things like that is the other aspect of scaling that like we're figuring out. But it's those are the two ways I've found that have allowed my practice to kind of grow with like the deluge of both really cool and cool but weird. I keep saying weird. I think it's we should call the episode that weird law topics I get.
I want to jump into to add something that I've found really cool but not weird. In the this is going to work out for you, Matt. Hold on, let me
Sure, go
finish.
on. Yeah, go on.
The clients Matt has been getting, so Matt has been getting, I get to see them, right? Because a lot of times he's asking for Latitude support for a particular deal or client, whatever it might be, but also Masters to Friends. We talk about the stuff we each have going. Some of the clients that Matt's getting are like marquee clients, right? Like publicly traded companies, international companies, billion with a B dollar companies. And so that's not just to make Matt feel great. It's to point out what he's done was one, cool, not weird, but two, it's major companies asking for major support, right? And that is, I think that's what everyone wants when they're thinking about building their own practice, right? But everyone thinks it's unattainable. I mean, I think Matt, you're living proof that it's not. It takes some creativity and gumption and courage to do it, but it's doable. It's 100% doable.
Agreed. Thanks, dude. By the way, that was a nice. I'll only ask you guys this, outside of just more in a professional setting. It is so hard for me to accept compliments. I don't know if it's a lawyer thing or that's just
No, I can't do it. I think I'm physically incapable.
I feel weird. Alex, are you good with compliments?
I'm not sure I've ever received one, but
that was nice. That was good. That's good. Alex, wait. Hold on,
I can't wait till I get my first one, guys.
I called you the best podcast host around. You stopped earlier in this episode.
Well, false humility is a big approach of mine, so you can borrow that. But no, I think what Kyle said is absolutely true, and I'll double down on that. Matt's been, and this is why I think maybe we should have led off with your roster. But yes, these are publicly traded companies, international companies. This is also why we are such big believers in social media, even though there is another group of people who probably believe that social media is not the right place to do business development for lawyers and law firms. But to go back to what you were saying earlier, I think when you start a practice, the first and most important thing is, can you get those clients? If you can solve for that, it does seem like everything else is fixable. Like you say, Matt, through processes or people or quick plug alert, Latitude attorneys, there's so many ways to solve when you have a huge amount of workload. Now, if you have no work, that's when you're in trouble, right? So it seems like focusing on what matters when you launch a firm, which is client acquisition, seems to be the most important part.
Yeah, I mean, probably Kyle, you'll probably remember this from private practice. You can find attorneys to do the work. It's bringing in the work. You can find people to do the work, and the business generation is so huge. And when you just start a firm, that's all you can think about. And it honestly, it becomes a problem, because if you don't start bringing in that work, you make bad decisions. You make really bad decisions. You have the work coming in, you can make good decisions, you can make strategic decisions. I don't want that work. I want to do that work long term. I can start marketing for other work because I can make representations that I've done other kinds of work. And I think you see so often that people are like, I don't want to go solo. I don't want to start a firm because I want to make sure that I have honed my craft. And then you end up with a 30-year attorney or 25-year attorney that has no book of business, is maybe exceptional at what they do, but they don't have business generated. They have no way of generating business. They were on the internet or going to conferences or doing things to generate the business. And they can't make those good decisions. They can't, because they don't have the business to allow them to make those decisions. And I find that so often. I know that kills an ego for a lawyer, but it's true. People can do the work. It's bringing in the work that really matters.
To that point too, to take it in a little bit of a different direction. The other cool thing I've seen about Latitude, and it's not something I thought about before I took this job, but there's a good amount of not even just new practitioners, but practitioners who've been around for a long time who use us to supplement their work, right?
Sure.
Maybe they have 1,000 hours a year of their sweet spot work at their sweet spot rate, but I wouldn't mind being a little busier, especially with some really sophisticated marquee clients, maybe that they haven't gotten yet, or they don't want to go get for whatever reason, right? And then we can get them plugged in on our clients looking for really, really high quality lawyers onto those projects. And so it helps feed them workflow, and then sometimes they turn around and use us for their own stuff. My point being, today in 2025, there's way more ways than ever to get clients, get work, and get work done.
I agree with that. Someone had I was kind of speaking about this. I did some posts on the internet, pissed off a bunch of people, and it's if you were Rift, if there's a reduction of force and you're an in-house attorney, you were Rift, why not start a practice? Give it a shot. Try it out. What do you have to lose at this point? Especially because the market, I don't know if the market's necessarily super favorable for folks applying for in-house jobs. And I got a comment similar, and it was like, hey, well, some people just want to work for law firms. And I'm like, that makes sense. Law firms are clients too. Law firms are clients
Mm-hmm.
too. These folks that are really good at what they're doing that can bring in appellate attorneys are the perfect example of that. Appellate attorneys are fantastic at their craft, and their clients are the client, sure, but really like they're getting the work from the trial attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly what you're describing. Folks can get work from these services from Latitude and do the work, great practitioners, but they also have to like develop those relationships in that business and develop those soft skills like we talked about, because they're going to be interviewing with these law firms, right, or these clients to get the work. So but I agree with you. There's other ways to get it, but I view that just the same way as client acquisition. Is getting
Mm-hmm.
hooked up with these groups. Again, Latitude is a great example to bring in clients like law firms and these like enterprise clients like these big companies.
I do think a lot of people who start off a firm or are thinking about it, I think, yes, they worry about how they're going to get clients, but they're also worried about a problem they don't quite have yet, which is if I get a great big client, like one of these public companies, how am I going to service them?
Yep.
Right. And I think what, my hope with today's podcast is, and some of the marketing material we put out is there's a lot of options. You don't necessarily have to hire a full-time employee because we know that costs a lot. If they're not productive, it can it could damage your profits. And so what we found at Latitude is we work with lots of small firms who have an excess amount of demand or work from clients, and we provide them an expert, somebody who's an experienced attorney in a specific area, and they can plug them in on ongoing, fractionally, or full time if needed. But there are a lot of ways to service the work, and so almost as a small firm owner, I would say, worry more about the client acquisition, because servicing it, there are so many options these days. One of which certainly is Latitude.
Agreed. I see that a lot with like in-house departments too. Like they will bring in fractional support like that, and they'll learn from those individuals, because that's the beauty of. I think that's like a secret sauce thing. Like Latitude, you'll grab someone. Let's use tax. Tax is a good example. I don't know why someone's hiring a tax attorney internally.
Mm-hmm.
It almost scares me a little bit. I don't know what's going on. But let's say they need a tax attorney. They bring in a tax attorney that's a subject matter expert. That particular tax attorney on the platform you're right, Kyle is a good example. Like, they just supplements their practice. It makes it fully well-rounded because the work is coming in steadily. They don't have to really do much as it relates to client acquisition. Obviously, they need to sell themselves to the client long term, but I've seen this, like the GC, DGC, whoever's utilizing that person will learn from the tax attorney and will not to say they will become a tax attorney, but they'll pick up that knowledge. They'll be able to soak up that knowledge. So like I've seen that actually with privacy is probably the greatest example, is where you'll get a privacy attorney and utilize that privacy attorney to kind of learn privacy yourself. It's like, I feel like it's like a secret sauce of it too, where it's like, I do want to continue. I'm going to service the work. I want to continue to service the work. And you hire fractionally this expert who will also help you learn how to properly service the work as well.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Matt. Last week I was working with two different clients in that capacity, but they were different in the sense that one was a law firm person breaking off, doing their own thing,
Sure.
and wanted to sort of learn how to do commercial contracts. Had done a lot of other things in her career.
It's a good example.
It was like, can I basically hire like a very experienced commercial contracts attorney through Latitude, and they'll walk me through it, because I'm bringing in the clients. I just need to learn how to do the work. 6 months, 9 months, 12 months later, they can do commercial contracts. The other was a new GC at a large privately held company who was new to the GCC. It was like, I would love to have 10 hours a week of sort of overflow help, but also just GC counseling from an experienced general counsel in my space.
That's cool, like a mentor.
And we had somebody that's now been working with that attorney to sort of learn not to get confidence, right? Confidence and also overflow work, right? But it's a similar concept. My point is, you can also do it on the in-house side. It's worked really well.
Oh yeah, I like that. I didn't think about the mentorship. I've never heard of that use case, but that's interesting. Like, it's almost like you're hiring them in the context of like a consult. Yeah, like it's almost like a consultant mentor.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, the GCC, it's lonely, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard. It can be lonely. It can be very difficult. And the buck stops with you, right? And so sort of like being a law firm partner, can be kind of scary at times. So it's nice to be able to have someone else who's been in that seat who you can lean on as needed to sort of work through decisions and processes, work through blind spots,
Yeah,
and then help you get some of the stuff done day to day.
that's cool. That was I didn't think about that as well, but I will say like that's I get hired all the time in that setting. Like, don't get me wrong, like I'm hired for my legal acumen and to help do the work, but sometimes I get hired because I've got a fantastic GC. Like this is where like the fractional deputy stuff comes in, where GC will hire me and he's like, or she was like, hey, I just need you as a sounding board. I need you to come in. Like, I understand you've been here too, and like we're both in a similar setting. Like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Help me get to X, Y, and Z, but also let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Yeah, it's quite a lonely position, the solo. But that's an interesting point, Kyle. I appreciate that because I didn't think about that way of using like fractional talent.
We've been going for a little while now, and I think we don't want to take up too much of your time, Matt. But maybe the last question I have for you is, if you could go back when you first started, before you launched, what advice would you give yourself? And
Like
in the going solo, in the context of a lot of people who are thinking, I think you mentioned, you posted about people who are rift, they should consider it. I bet they've got a lot of worries, concerns, and doubts.
Mhm.
So what advice would you give to them and yourself back in the day?
No, I think like real advice, looking back, is two things. I've kind of preached this online now. It's like the operations piece. Like while you're building, you're gonna be frantic. I don't care how level headed and cool minded you are. Like you are going to be frantic because you are a entrepreneur, whether you realize it or not. Starting your business from the ground up, especially if you're an in-house attorney where you probably don't have a book of business. Maybe you got to keep the company because they still need you in a partial fractional capacity. Operations is key. So like I would say make sure you understand and you're building the bones, because what's going to happen is if you do succeed and you really start bringing the clients and you're knocking it out of the park, you're going to be stress test multiple times, and that stress test is also going to stress you out personally, and you'll see things crack. So make sure you're building things quickly, and you can make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes, but at least putting an emphasis on that is important. So build the bones, test the bones, break the bones, but build them back up, because it's going to matter if you could really grow. Second thing is leverage the community like you've never leveraged before. We are, Alex, you've said this to me like 100 times in the past. Lawyers are so weird when it comes to selling things, right? Like I don't feel like we want to be overt about selling, right? Now there are bar rules in place, and I'm not saying to violate any sort of ethical obligations or rules you may have. I'm saying don't be afraid to ask your friends and say, hey, I need some help. Let me know if you have overflow work. Going to Kyle is a good example. Hey, Kyle, listen, if you have any engagements that are coming up, if there's clients that you have that need contract overflow support, I just started my firm. I'd love that help. I'm a good attorney, but asking for it. Like I've talked to so many attorneys that are so afraid to just like go out and say, I'm starting this firm, I'm doing this thing, call me. If we are friends, if I know you, going to your friends and family and asking, going to colleagues, opposing counsels that you ended up becoming friendly with, whoever, and trying to sell yourself. That's important. So those are the two things. Like I think you end up being, at least on the second point, you end up being like proud. You're like, I'm going to do this way, and there's no pride in starting a business.
Well said. Well said. We're about to wrap up, but before we do, I wanted to give you a chance to share all your socials in case for those few listeners who've been living under a rock who have not seen your Insta or your LinkedIn.
Sure.
How can listeners find you, Matt?
It's Matt's Law on every social platform. Unless it's a social platform I've never heard of, then it's not me. But Instagram, LinkedIn, obviously my name is on LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter X, whatever it's called, Threads, Blue Sky, the calculator app on your phone.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for spending the time with us today on Leveraging Latitude. We wish you the best of luck, and we really enjoy watching I personally enjoy watching your journey. I can't believe the three of us all work together in some sense, given that, I've basically met both of you online, but now we've all hung out in person. So, yeah, thanks for sharing your insights and your experiences.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right. On that note, everyone, we will see you all in the next episode. Thanks again, Matt and Kyle, for guest hosting.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today. If you found this content valuable, please tell a friend or colleague about us. Also, if you can, please give us a rating and a short review on your podcast listening platform. The more ratings and reviews we have, the more people will find us. If you have a question, reach out to us at latitudelegal.com.